Hey, it's Chuck. We are not bemoaning the noon kickoff. We are now owning it. It's a badge of honor. We're the lunatic fringe that defines our coach's legacy when it comes to this game. They don't get to define that outside the family. We're cut from a different cloth for Ohioans. He's got it all, man. He's even got the jaw. You know the jaw. You see that jaw, and you're just like, yeah, man, that's a dude. Do I want Michigan to beat Oklahoma? No way in hell. I don't know what world I'm living in. This is insane to me. And if you saw my outburst, I apologize. It's showtime now. It is showtime. It is showtime now here at Buckeye Huddle Prime Time as we join you here every Monday and Wednesday at 8 p.m. And we do appreciate you joining us here on a loaded Wednesday night show. Please do like the show. Please subscribe to the channel. That is the currency by which we kind of deal with here in this gig, and we need your help. We don't want your money. We just want your sub and in your like. That would help as well as your comments. Your comments help too. Get in this chat. Get in this chat. All super chats will be read, of course. And you don't need to super chat to get me to read it. In between segments and always at the end of the show, I like to pop in. And if you put a question mark, then I'll know it's for me. It'll signal it. And I try to always grab those if I can towards the end there in the chat. You can also super chat, of course, and I read all those super chats. Tom and Tony, when I'm watching them, get way more super chats than me. And the disparity is giving me a bit of a complex, to be quite honest. Not that I want your money. It's just kind of a thing, right? Like, I know that I'm certainly not as witty as Tom, and I don't have that fatherly logical deal. I'm sorry, as witty as Tony and the fatherly logical thing going on like Tom does. But, a super chat would be welcome. That would be awesome. Anyway, Michigan back in action this weekend after a bye week. And I think it's probably time that we start talking about that game here pretty soon. I'm finding myself having a difficult time talking about that game after last year, because it seems like now to try to talk about it or to try to preview it is almost like nonsensical at this point. It's totally nonsensical to try to like break down the game and talk about the matchups after last year, because nothing seems normal about that game. Like, what are you going to say here? What happened last year was totally illogical. Never should have happened, yet it did. So how can I sit here and talk about the X's and O's and the matchups when really it's going to come down to what Ohio State does? How do they play their game? How do they game plan? And we really just have no idea. So I'm kicking it off, man. I'm just not ready to talk about it. I'm just not feeling it. We do have some very important visits coming in for this UCLA game, and thank goodness it's a night game. We'll go over that visitor list today, along with what Ryan Day had to say yesterday at his press conference about recruiting philosophy and the size of this class. I think it's really, really interesting. And I have got a tidbit to share with you regarding a conversation that I had with one of the commits in this class yesterday. And it changes a whole lot about what I thought about this particular commit. And it might think a lot about what you thought about him too. Basically, what you might have had in your head about what Ohio State was getting here with Legend Bey. Ohio State now playing their fourth team in a row that they're massive favorites over, and one more after that with Rutgers. So the conversation now kind of turns to a few things for me, as the game at hand, a 30.5 point favorite, isn't really, we're not going to break that down. It's not competitive, but it turns to a couple things. One, it turns to Michigan. And like I said, I'm not ready to talk about it yet. The other one, any potential chinks in the armor for this number one team in the country. And the playoff committee put out their stuff. And of course, the Buckeyes still number one. What are the biggest areas of this team that still need worked on before you head into what I basically consider to be the playoff season, starting with the game to the Big Ten championship, then to the actual playoffs? Playoff season, we'll call it. What needs worked on? We'll talk about that today. But let's start with the incredibly positive momentum we got going on here with this class of 2026 that has shocked a lot of people. As December 3rd and 5th wrap up early signing period, and the entire month of December leading into that is a dead period. So basically, this is Ohio State's last chance, everybody's last chance to really push hard to close down this class of 2026 strong, and Ohio State on a tear. And the class is now up to 25 members. And we talked the other day about the overall philosophy change, as we're used to seeing Ohio State load up early and get up to like number 1 or number 2, and then slowly drop down the board as they got everybody they want, maybe get a few guys here and there to close off the class. But we see other programs surge late, and Ohio State plays defense. And this year, totally flipped on its head. And Ryan Day talked about this in his press conference on Tuesday. One of the things I really love about Ryan Day, and something that I think he is excellent at, is staying ahead of change. And, he doesn't always make the perfect decision, but he always has a plan in place and implements that plan and then adjusts it. He never gets caught with his pants down going, oh, shoot, we should have done something. We should have seen that coming. They're always ahead of something. And it seems like Ohio State has totally changed the way they've gone about recruiting this cycle. One of the changes that's really affecting recruiting moving forward, and we talked about this the other day, but I want to bring it up again because Ryan Day hit on it at his press conference, is just the one portal window. And it happens to be at the time when, if you are a big time competitor for the national championship, you're at a huge disadvantage. If things go the way that Ohio State is planning on them going this year, the portal will be closed before they're done playing. And then when they are done playing for 5 days, Ohio State's roster opens up for everybody to come and feast on their players. And that's massive. That means the rest of the country who missed out on their portal guys, there is no spring portal coming. So the only option they have is to go after those teams that competed in the national championships roster. That's it. It's the only option they got, which means they'll be going after them much harder. Before, they could say, okay, well, we can make up for that in the spring portal. They can't do that anymore. So they're incentivized even more than they were before to go after those championship rosters. How does Ohio State handle this? How do they prevent themselves from being stuck in a terrible spot with holes all over the roster? Well, for one, Ohio State talks to every guy on the roster, and they do this before the transfer portal opens. They talk performance, they talk future, they talk money with the agents. They try to retain the guys that they feel they need. And then they have those tough conversations with guys they think may benefit in their careers from going somewhere else. And when your culture is as good as Ryan Day has made it at Ohio State, which in my opinion is the best in the country, you can expect you're going to hear a whole lot of truth from those players. And based on those conversations, they're going to have a really good feel of who's leaving, who's staying, and they know who's coming in their recruiting class. So now, based on those conversations, they know what they need to target in the transfer portal for the upcoming year. But this year, there's a new wrench thrown in the plans. And that is that this is the only portal window. There is no spring window. And this can really get you stuck in a pickle, and it's affected recruiting. So let's run through a plausible scenario here. So here's a plausible example of something we could see happening. And this is a reason why Ohio State, in my opinion, is going after a much bigger class. So Ohio State goes on a run where they make it to the national championship, and then the Ohio State portal opens where people can come for their guys. And in the class next year, they got one running back, Guerreri. Why just one? Well, they got CJ Donaldson leaving, which means that leaves them with a running back room of James Peoples, Sam Dixon, and the 3 freshmen this year, Turbo, Isaiah West, Bo Jackson, and then in comes Guerreri. That's 6 guys. Well, let's say they already know that Sam Dixon is going to re-enter the transfer portal. He's not only been passed up by 2 freshmen, but he's not the top dog in his class, so probably better for him to leave entering year 3. Well, that leaves 5, and that would be fine, but it's close. Then they do their conversations with everybody, and James Peoples says, Coach, I want to stay. And Coach says, you finished the season really good. You needed more experience, and you liked the way you ran. You looked like you had some fire, and maybe next year, instead of the 4 backs, we do 3 backs. And I'm looking at you and Isaiah and Bo, and James feels good about that. And okay, we're moving forward. The conversation's over with. And then he pops off and has some good runs in the playoffs. And then after the national championship, somebody comes after James and says, we want you to be our feature back here's triple the offer of what you're making. Well, now James, who was honest, right? Or this could be anybody. I'm just using him as an example, who was honest and said, yes, I want to stay. Well, now he has the conversation with his parents and with his agent. And this looks like an opportunity that he can't pass up. So he goes back to Ohio State and explains the situation, which puts Ohio State in the position of either we let him walk or we try to match the offer to get him to stay. But now you got to factor in, well, now you're operating under a salary cap and you've already allocated the funds for your roster. The transfer portal's over. You got your class signed. You already did those negotiations with those incoming freshmen. You already did the negotiation to retain your roster. The roster's set. There isn't just a pile of money laying around. And even if there was a pile of money laying around, you don't want to set the precedent that you can just come in and strong arm your way into more money at the end, going about it like this. You don't want to set that precedent. Not that, you don't trust the players, but they're all working with agents now. And these guys, you know how they operate. So the Buckeyes don't match this offer, let's say. And now instead of 5, they've now lost both their sophomores from this year or juniors next year in James Peoples and Sam Dixon. And now the running back room goes Isaiah West, Bo Jackson, Turbo Rogers in favor. That's not where you want to be. So with all that explained, Ryan Day, who's always a forward thinker with a plan and thinks about every single angle, has said, okay, guys, here's what we're going to do. I want each of you to go out and get yourself one more guy than you would normally take. And that is what we're seeing. And I think that's why we're going to see a class that pushes close to 30 guys. And Ryan Day said yesterday, whoever plays past when the date the portal closes late in the season is going to really be at a disadvantage. There's no way to replace those guys once that 5-day window opens after the final game. We all have to make sure that we're not short. That's our job. So we're going to make sure we're in good shape and we're flush. And I love the sound of the word flush. All of us who love high school recruiting love the sound of the word flush. That's like 4 or 5 more guys we get to have in the class. And I know how much you guys love that if you're a recruitniks like me. And when we look through what Ohio State has done, what he's trying to do here at the end of the cycle, add at least one more guy, right? Emmanuel Ruffin, defensive tackle number 4. Tim Walton, this weekend, trying to add cornerback number 3. James Laurinaitis, trying to add linebacker number 3. Tyler Bowen had to grab that number 6 guy or that number 5 guy and probably looking for another 6 guy. I'm just checking your guys' question marks. I will get to them, guys. Appreciate it. So Ryan Day also talked about evaluations. Evaluations never being as important as they are now on Tuesday. He said you just can't afford to have bad investments anymore. These are critical decisions, and we need to turn over every stone and make sure we're right. Not that we're 100%, but we got to do our part. We got to do our due diligence and make sure that we are evaluating these guys with all the possible information we can get and do right by the university. They're spending a lot of money on everybody now. And what does he mean by that? He means we want to get as much of that senior film as we can on guys that we're not 100% sure on, which means instead of a class where we would normally see Ohio State load up early, we're going to see them push as many guys as they can till after they can get some senior film. And then they're going to go hard and try to flip them late, which is risky. It's a riskier proposition, especially if you're not someone dealing with a wad of cash where you can go in and flip guys like that. But we've seen recently they've done a hell of a job with it, and they're flipping quite a few guys. And, despite the disadvantage that Ohio State's been at here monetarily, they're not offering guaranteed NIL deals like so many of their competitors are. They're just offering revenue share and the ability to come in and work with the Buckeye Sports Group and earn third-party NIL deals. A lot of other programs offering revenue share plus guaranteed NIL deals, which you can now do legally through a little loophole with the NIL collective where you're essentially manufacturing gigs once you get the guys on campus. Ohio State isn't doing that. And if they can potentially get into that top 5 or top 6, despite that disadvantage, right now they're in 7th, it will be tremendously impressive. A tremendously impressive job by the football staff, being somewhat handcuffed, being able to do that. So I'm super stoked by that. Now, he also talked about versatility and brought up Xavier Johnson, Mitch Rossi, a couple of local legends. We all love those two. And how important it is to get some versatility out of these guys, even from the scout team. And we've seen some versatility this year. We're seeing freshman tight end Nate Roberts, who is a tight end, essentially playing a lot of fullback. And I know a lot of people are tired of seeing that package. I get it. I don't like that it's Nate that's being talked about, because Nate's going to be a stud. He's a stud tight end playing out of position, and he's catching a little heat here, man. The guy's a freshman doing what his team's asking him. So he's trying his best. He's not a fullback. But the point is versatility, looking for versatility, because now you're only dealing with 100 guys. He said about 100 guys on the roster. They used to have 120, right? So you're missing 20 guys. So even on the scout team, we're bringing in guys into the program who have versatility. And I think you can see maybe by some of the guys that we're adding to the roster here, even over the last month, they can do multiple things. And I think that's important. Now, when we talk about this class, nobody more versatile than Legend Bey. Legend Bey out of Texas, North Forney High School, a quarterback that Ohio State flipped from Tennessee. Tennessee was bringing him in as a wide receiver. And Legend, I don't know how you thought about Legend, but in my head, based on Legend's listing, what I had in my head thinking about Legend was an unbelievable, slightly undersized, electric athlete with the ball in his hands, with incredible raw speed, guy who ran a wind aided 10.23. That's, a 10.7 non-wind aided. So not quite as fast as Jameer Brown, but a crazy fast, verified track guy whose open field vision is just insane. His cuts are insane. He's also powerful, but slightly undersized. Now that is what I had in my head. I'm thinking a stockier, stronger DeMario McCall type of player that you can use all over the place. My only question was, would we actually see Ohio State utilize a guy like this? Because it takes effort to put a guy like this in positions to be successful. And usually these guys are most successful at places where they are the best athlete on the team and the coaching staff has no choice but to get them the ball creatively. You think West Virginia, early Chip Kelly, where we've seen these guys really flourish. Well, that is what I thought, and that's what I had in my head. And then somebody DM'd me and said, I think you are mischaracterizing Legend. How so? I think you need to check his measurements. I've checked his measurements all over the place. Well, they happen to be all over the place. At Rivals, he's listed as 5'9", 175. At 247, 5'10 and a half, 185. At ESPN, 5'11. Oh boy, this is all over the place. I had never asked him, and I've talked to him several times, I never asked him about his height and weight because I thought, and usually when you're a smaller or an undersized guy, people constantly talk about that when they bring you up, and it felt rude to ask, so I never did. But I went ahead and asked, do you know what he told me? He told me I'm 6'1", 196. Now, whether or not you believe that's true, let's say he is slightly off. Let's even give it a 2-inch range. If this is a 5'11 and a half, or almost 6 foot athlete at 200 pounds, that means he'll be about 210 at Ohio State. Now, that is a totally different ball game. If the guy we're watching on that film is close to 6 foot, 200 pounds. Because like I said, in my head, we're talking about a DeMario McCall type player where you got to be creative in what ways you're going to utilize him. If he's a 200 pounder, totally different ball game. Now, you really don't need to be that creative. Now, whether they get creative or not, that's a guy who can just be a running back or just be a slot receiver. You don't need to do all this different business with him. He actually is Curtis Samuel's build, not just a guy who could play like Curtis. You look at Isaiah West. Isaiah's 210 right now, and Isaiah's the most powerful back on the team for my money. So if Legend is 200 pounds and he's close to 6 foot, he says 6'1", 196, incredibly exciting and a totally different ball game. And of course, as we said, this Buckeyes class up to 7th with a huge night game against UCLA for visits. And let's go over those visits. And we'll start with the 2026 guys as they try to seal up this class and keep climbing that ladder. Tim Walton bringing in C.J. Bronoff. C.J. Bronoff, hopefully the third cornerback in this class. And C.J. said, look, he's committed to Florida still, and it's Florida and Ohio State for the kid out of Windermere, Florida. Windermere, where Tiger and all the golfers live, he is the 14th ranked corner in the class at 6'2", 190, a 4-star, and he is not as polished as Jay Timmons, the kid that the Buckeyes just flipped from Florida State. Jay Timmons, the number 2 corner in the class. CJ, not as polished, but another track kid. He's faster than Jay Timmons. He's bigger than Jay Timmons. He's longer. Think Aaron Scott's kind of build, the long arms. Got a ton of potential, just a little bit raw, and that's fine. Not looking for a guy to come in and play immediately. But, the question was, and I thought that Ohio State would for sure flip Jay Timmons because you're looking at a room at corner where you were low on numbers, which means, well, now you've got the budget to make sure you get him because you had to get one high-level guy to pair with Jordan Thomas, and they got him. Do they have enough to make this work for C.J. Bronoff? And there are other programs coming after him, but right now it's Ohio State and Florida for him. He seems pretty enamored by Ohio State. He'll be in for UCLA. This will be an official for him, and we know the Buckeyes nail those. Could they potentially swing this? If they do, Jay Timmons, C.J. Bronoff pairing with Jordan Thomas, this would be a masterpiece at corner for Tim Walton. Absolutely. Then we go to who's the defensive end you're going to pair with Khari Wilder. Khari Wilder, 5-star defensive end who I think is going to play more of what we're seeing Caden Curry play this year, all over the defensive line, strong enough to line up at nose and, just powerhouse with speed and a kid who walks in as a man. He's a grown man. He will play next year as a freshman. I have no doubt about that. 5-star, total stud. But you need a pair with him. You got 4 defensive tackles. You just got him as a defensive end. Dre Quinn is the guy that's coming in this weekend that the Buckeyes really, really want to pair with him. And Dre, not quite built like Khari. He's longer, leaner, a little lighter at about 225, out of Buford, Georgia, 6'4", 6'5". A hell of an athlete, man. A hell of an athlete and a guy who's a real character fit. And he is down, the former Clemson commit, decommitted from Clemson. And when he decommitted, it looked like it was probably going to be Texas, who was his runner-up. But Texas, Tennessee, Ohio State in on it big. Also Miami and the hometown Georgia Tech and Brent Key trying to keep him home. He said his decision could be next week or it could be closer to signing day. He's not going to rush it, but he sounds open to making a quick decision. And coming up to Ohio State for the UCLA game, I like where the Buckeyes sit with him. It sounds to me like if you were going to say Buckeyes or the field, I would pick the field. I would. So that's going to be a real exciting one to see how that happens. And then we got Braxton Rembert. Rembert is the linebacker from Georgia, from Caleb Downs High School, committed to Wake Forest. Wake Forest, his only P5 offer, the only one, 6'5", 200 pounds. So a tall, skinny kid who is lightning fast. Lateral movement doesn't look fantastic, but James Laurinaitis thinks he found a diamond in the rough here. And if James Laurinaitis thinks he found a diamond in the rough, remember, one P5 offer, and now he gets an offer from Ohio State. That's crazy. This kid's got to be over the moon. So he comes into town, and if James Laurinaitis wants this Wake Forest commit with only one P5 offer, it would seem to me like we can go ahead and pencil this kid in. 3-star, number 1,356th ranked player in the country. So not going to move the needle for the class rank. And this is a long play. This is a guy that could potentially turn into a super stud with that frame, or maybe not. Either way, you take a swing at him. I love it. Then you got J.J. Finch, another potential defensive end here, a kid out of Warren High School in Indiana, who is 6'3", 260, committed to Alabama. And when we talk about him and the other defensive end about that size that Ohio State's trying to flip from North Carolina, Jimmy Frisco Saliafu out of Katy, Texas, I think that J.J. Finch is definitely a superior player, and I would really love for him to be in this class over Jimmy Frisco Saliafu, who has really he's a very good football player. I think he'll end up moving inside, whereas Finch, I think, can play outside. Both 6'3", 6'4", 260, but Finch way faster feet. And that one pretty exciting as he kind of popped up out of nowhere recently and immediately wants to come into town. A lot of times when we see that, we see fast decisions. So those are the 2026ers. 2027, Keenan Bailey, shocking with the Brock Williams visit out of nowhere. So Brock Williams, the number 2 tight end in the class in 2027, down to Georgia, Texas, and Ohio State. And Georgia and Texas are playing this week. Brock electing to come to Ohio State to watch them play UCLA over Georgia and Texas, which is pretty telling. 6'5", 210 out of Illinois. And second year in a row that Keenan Bailey going after an incredibly highly rated tight end out of Illinois. Remember Max Sutter, Keenan just has finally, heard that he's shutting down his recruitment, and Keenan was all in on him, man. Would not give up. I don't think there's any way Keenan goes that hard after somebody 2 years in a row and misses out, man. They have a hard time saying no. He just keeps going. That's how he got Nate. And I ultimately think he's going to end up getting this dude, but he'll be in town. Will Brock Williams also being pursued heavily by Brady Edmonds, who has developed not just a friendship with him, but their parents have developed a friendship. And Brady has been a superstar peer recruiter in this class. Our dude, Juck-Eye Brady, is killing it. Also, some offensive linemen in Jackson Roper, a 4-star offensive lineman out of Colorado, 6'4", 290. Dewey Young, a 4-star out of Kalamazoo, Michigan, 6'5", 285. And then a stud edge out of Will Howard's town, Downington, Pennsylvania, Abraham Cisse, a 4-star top 100 overall, who is a total stud. So he'll be in town. And then you got Matt G's top 2 safeties. And it's looking like Matt Guerreri is one of the better recruiters in the country. This dude just seemingly always gets his top targets. Eli Johnson and Jaquan Snell, 2 total studs, top 100 kids out of the state of Texas. And I think they're probably his number 1 and number 2 targets in the country, or targets on his board. Both 6'3", 190 pounders. Jaquan Snell, to me, is the best safety in the country. This kid is ridiculous. Out of Waxahachie, a Waxahachie kid. Waxahachie, of course, Calvin Simpson Hunt. It's one of Tim Walton's cornerbacks in the class where he brought in Jermaine Matthews, who has since transferred to Texas Tech. But this kid's legit, man. He was supposed to come up for the last home game, didn't make it. So he makes it on a return visit here. And then you got Blake Benton, who is a linebacker out of Minnesota, 20 miles from where James Laurinaitis went to high school, that James Laurinaitis has gone and found. A 3-star kid, 6'3", 220, out of, I can't pronounce it, Minnesota. So that is the list. That's who's coming in for the game at UCLA. And again, a night game out of the blue. It's a Peacock game, guys. I don't know if you heard that. We got another game on Peacock. But a night game nonetheless. Buckeyes 30.5-point favorites to Nico and the Bruins. And what to me is 2 of the 5 best uniforms in all of college football, with UCLA and Ohio State. I wish they could wear their blues. Do you know all it takes to get a color-on-color matchup is for the away team to agree on it and the conference to agree that the colors are contrast enough for the officials, which means Ohio State and Michigan, Ohio State and UCLA. Ohio State could play a color-on-color, and the terminology there, if you're not familiar, that is UCLA's blue jerseys, Ohio State's scarlet jerseys, or Michigan's blue jerseys, Ohio State's scarlet jerseys. All you got to do is agree on that, and you can do it. Why in the world can't we see this more? UCLA and USC play color on color, and it is a beautiful sight. I absolutely love it every year. It's a terrible game, but I tune in just to look at those uniforms. If Ohio State and Michigan played the game color on color, it would be infinitely better, and they used to way back in the day. But that's all they got to do to get it done. So I would love to see that. Anyway, let's hop in a couple of your comments before I move on to the next segment. And we'll start with Mitchell. Juck, who is your favorite Buckeye of all time? Mine's Ted Ginn Jr. Mine is Antoine Winfield. Antoine Winfield from Garfield High School here in the city. Garfield no longer here in the city, shut down, but Antoine, who was just legendary in high school and of course went on to become legendary at Ohio State, probably sits atop my Mount Rushmore of favorite Buckeyes. Mike Vrabel, also in my personal Mount Rushmore, who I was a ball boy for Walsh Jesuit High School when Mike Vrabel was starring at Walsh Jesuit. And to me, he was, I don't know, man, 15 feet tall and Superman, right? As a young, like 5th, 6th grade kid running balls. You know what I mean? It was an awesome experience to be able to be, close to him and then watch him go on to Ohio State and do what he did. It was tremendous. So those two right there, I would say, Beanie is up there too. Again, these are all guys from my city that I watch play high school ball. You get a certain level of attachment. And then after that, maybe Katzenmoyer would be my 4th there. Maybe Katzenmoyer. But yeah, that's my crew. But Antoine sits atop the pack for me, for sure. Andrew asks, any chance of flipping Rock Hill or Luke Wafel? Absolutely not for Rock Hill. And for Luke, I have been of the opinion that there is 0 chance that's happening for a long time, but we keep on hearing people bring it up. And now we hear potentially Lincoln potentially snooping around for another job. Josh Pate threw that out there. I don't know how much truth there is to that. That was I think the only thing we heard of it was him throwing out there, keep an eye on Lincoln on the show he does with Taylor Lewan and the Nebraska kid that said, what's the Nebraska guy? The guy that said Fernando Mendoza is much more impressive than Julian Sayin, and even if Julian Sayin wins, he should because he has a better cast of characters, etc. Whatever that guy's name is. So Pate was on the show and he said something about keep an eye on Lincoln and USC when talking about coaches. So that talk also got people thinking maybe Luke would flip. I think it's been a whole waste of time. So the thing is, Ohio State had him, went way outside their comfort zone, and then USC came back immediately, like within 4 hours, and gave him an offer that Ohio State couldn't touch or wouldn't touch. Totally irresponsible, because there's always one dummy in the room who's going to go way outside market value on a player. There always is one dummy. USC that dummy, and they were that dummy for a lot of players in this cycle. And because of that, I just don't think it's possible. Now, is there anything that would make you think things aren't good at USC that would change his mind? I mean, if you're looking at these defenders in this USC class, look at our offense. All we need is you, my man. All we need is you. You're going to be a star. We're already seeing attendance pick up at the Coliseum. Things are rocking at USC when they're good. And it looks like a pretty enticing place to be right now. So no, I don't think so. That's my honest opinion. But this is a good one from Ken. How many years do y'all think we're able to keep Matt P? This one is scary. I don't want him to go. You look at him and you listen to him, and gosh, does he seem happy in college football? He seems happy with his kids who are pretty young, right? I saw him with his daughter. I didn't even realize it, but she looks like she's in about 4th, 5th grade. So he's got young kids, seems to really like where he's living, where he's at in his career and his mental health. Everything looks great. But then, this guy is, he's an NFL guy, and the last couple of times in the NFL, the last few jobs didn't go well, and not just his head coach job at Detroit, but even after that. And you certainly hate to go out like that and kind of be viewed as, oh, he can do it in college, right? So I'm sure being a competitor, he's got a burning desire to be back in the NFL at some point. The question is, does somebody come calling immediately and try to pull him back in, or not? I don't know, but he seems to be very happy, and you can't trade mental health. It's not worth any amount of money. When we look at this guy and we look at the changes he's made in his life and the whole weight and the whole attitude, like everything feels different, and he feels genuinely happy. Because of that, I would set the over under on 3.5 years. 3.5 years at Ohio State, which I would love. Hey, Chuck, watching you all over the place, do you ever sleep? Adam, interesting you say that, Adam. I just took 2 days off. I took 2 days off. You didn't even notice, see? Hey, I don't know, man. 2 days off. Yesterday was the anniversary with the missus, so I did not work, didn't do anything. But then, sometimes I'll record and then air the show the next day. So maybe maybe that didn't make it seem like I was off for a couple days. Oh, if we lose Brian Hartline after this year, anybody in mind for replacement? I don't know, but I'll be honest. Is there any wide receivers coach in the country at any level of football, including the NFL, who wouldn't want to come to Ohio State and take on that job? Right? Like, number one, you've got ready-made studs everywhere. And number two, you're going to get more studs, and it's just going to make you look great for your career moving forward. It's wide receiver you. So as wonderful and one-of-a-kind Hartline is, like, you're going to get the next best thing, in my opinion. So I feel pretty good about it. But then, of course, you also got, the potential of staying in-house, has done a great job. So let's move on, and I want to talk about Tyler Bowen in the offensive line, and Tyler has done an amazing. Hines Ward from ASU. I like the sound of that. You would definitely have dogs, right? You would definitely have the best blocking wide receivers in the country, which I do think Ohio State may have had last year. That has fallen back a little bit this year. I would like to see that pick up for the playoffs. Tyler Bowen. Listen, if you watch me any amount of time, I'm such a huge fan of Tyler Bowen. Obviously, his recruiting prowess is fantastic. I love his recruiting strategy. I love everything he's done with that. And when you looked at this offensive line coming into this year, veteran group, essentially, right? With Austin and Luke and Tegra and Carson, some more than others, but all of them played against the top competition last year in the playoffs and route to a national championship. I felt really good about it. You bring in this new system with Tyler Bowen, and he brings in Marcus Johnson and Charlie Dickey from Purdue and Oklahoma State, respectively, essentially 3 offensive line coaches. Those two both had their own room last year. I mean, an excellent setup, and they were very cautious as to how they were going to go about this. And they made sure to get on the same page together. They made sure to go through how we are going to teach every single thing in every single scenario and make sure they had the same exact thing they were teaching, which could be the big potential hiccup here. And I love the sound of it. I loved everything about it. Well, this offensive line group just finished game number 9 of the season, right? How are they doing? How are things going? Certainly a surprise that Austin Sareveld became the left tackle. But after we kind of got over that surprise, it's essentially been the same lineup for the entire year with Austin Sareveld, Luke Montgomery, Carson Hinsman, Tegra, and Phil Daniels. And Tegra, kind of the weak link, right? There's always going to be one guy bringing up the rear of a pack of 5 dudes, and it has consistently been Tegra. And Ohio State has been trying to spell him every game, which started off with Ethan Onyanwa coming off the bench and subbing for about 15 plays of Tegra's 60 plays. And after the first 3 games, game 4 at Washington, Tegra played the whole game. And then game 5, we started seeing backup center, third-year Josh Padilla, coming in and subbing that 15 plays until a couple games ago, Padilla played as many as 24 of Tegra's snaps. And that's great. Padilla was playing good. He's a leverage monster. I personally think that his floor is about where Tegra's at. And then Padilla gets a little injury. Now, unfortunately, the Buckeye offensive line had their worst game of the year against Wisconsin. And then against Purdue last Saturday, a little bit of a different flavor as Phil Daniels was slightly dinged up, and we saw second-year Ian Moore come in and play right tackle. Of course, we've heard a lot of good things about Ian, and what a performance. What a performance by Ian. It was fantastic, and I'm going to talk more about him over on the Juck on Bucks show tomorrow. Phil Daniels has played pretty damn good this year, but when we looked at these guys as a group against Purdue, that first half, It was downright embarrassing. It was one of the worst performances of the year. It might have been the worst half of the year. Unacceptable. Totally unacceptable for a group of vets. I mean, it was pretty staggering. Integra, who is often the target of a lot of ire, and of course, he made, one very high profile play that got James Peoples blown up on a screen that flew around Twitter and social media, and everybody was pointing that out. The entire group was bad. They were terrible. They were misidentifying assignments. They were, they've been so bad at identifying poles and getting their poles down that they've gone with this diamond formation where they've got two tight ends in the backfield, and they're, instead of polling the offensive linemen, they're inserting these guys where those polling linemen would go because they've been so bad. They're not passing off stunts well. They're pulling off double teams early and letting a guy through. It was just a comedy of errors. They're falling down, knocking each other over. Like, the film from that first half, straight up embarrassing. Gabe Van Sickle. We saw Gabe Van Sickle spell Tegra instead of Padilla, and a lot of people clamoring, anybody put in Van Sickle. Gabe's not ready. I like Gabe. He made as many errors as Tegra. And the second half, totally different ball game, man. Everything was cleaned up. It was all good. So what does that tell us? Well, they're capable of playing great. We've seen them play great this year, but they have these lapses with just tons of errors, which is just, like I said, it's unacceptable. Game 9 of the season. You can't have a half like that against Michigan. You can't have a half like that in the playoffs. What's going on that they're having a game like that against Wisconsin where they're giving up 12 pressures against a crap defense, or a game like that against Purdue, a winless team? You can't have a half like that. That should not be happening against Purdue. Maybe with a group full of young guys that haven't played, not with this talented veteran group. These are vets now. And after watching the all 22 of this group from that game, I'm concerned. But there are some caveats. Number one, and this is the good news, right? The two young backs, they've been able to turn nothing into something and get to the second level at times. Isaiah West with 9 carries. He had 3 explosive runs with those 9 carries, 3 more missed tackles forced. He's among the leading probably 10 to 15% in the nation, forcing a missed tackle every 3 carries. Bo Jackson, he had, Ryan Day talked about 2 third and short conversions that he absolutely loved his physicality on those runs. And the second caveat as to why this wasn't as bad as it seemed is they're running into a lot of loaded boxes, not attaching a live RPO for Julian to get out of the play and take the quick pass. And we can only assume that they're doing this because they want to continue to get the run practice. They want to keep repping runs, which I get. I understand that you're going to practice against a team who's kind of a crappy opponent who you can easily beat. But why are we practicing things we're never going to do against an opponent in a real game, a matchup game? You're never going to run into an outnumbered box. So why practice it? I think all it's doing is confusing everybody. You're confusing the guys up front. You're getting the backs unnecessarily smashed. It doesn't make any sense. The question is, are you at all worried that in game 9 of the season, you watch a half like that from an offensive line that's a veteran group? Or does the fact that maybe Phil Daniels wasn't in make you feel a little better about it? If it does, bad news, Ian Moore's better, straight up. Which brings me to another point. Ian Moore is excellent. I don't think that they're going to be able to take him off the field now. I think he's going to start eating into some of Phil's snaps, and I'm a huge Phil Daniels fan. But Phil gets sloppy with his footwork, and it leads to sometimes games like the Wisconsin game where he gave up 6 pressures after only giving up 2 for the entire year. Ian was awesome. He was awesome. His footwork is flawless. He's passing off twists. Like, he's got it all, which is a great revelation. You wonder why we haven't seen him all year up to that point. He's ready. He's totally ready. Which got me to thinking, with all the issues at guard, Phil Daniels is a road grading run blocker. He's excellent at run blocking. It's his pass blocking where there are some, if you're going against a really beastly defensive end or edge rusher, Phil Daniels is not the guy you want in that situation over Ian Moore. You probably want Ian. Why haven't we seen Phil at tackle instead of Tegra? I'm sorry, at guard instead of Tegra, and Ian at tackle? Could that potentially be a solution here? Ryan Day talked about where they stand going into the following game with Josh Padilla. So Josh Padilla and Phil Daniels are both going to get a full practice this week. And Josh Padilla is going to definitely be splitting snaps with Tegra Shabola. And it sounded like, from what Ryan Day said, that we're going to see more of Padilla. At least it sounded like that. He was also asked about Ethan Onyanwa, and he talked about Ethan and basically said, we're going to continue to try to get him some reps and get him up to par, up to where he needs to be. And Ethan played 3 snaps at guard and maybe 9 snaps at tackle in that game against Purdue. And it was probably his best performance of the year. So you've got options opening up here now, right? You've got Gabe Van Sickle. You've got Padilla. You've got Ethan Onyanwa. You've got Ian Moore. You've got all these guys now on the 2 deep that have been playing. You got to find the right mix here to solidify this right side of the line. And you're running out of time. Ohio State averages against, 3.5 yards a carry against Wisconsin, 4 yards a carry against Purdue, and 4 yards a carry. Of those 4 yards a carry, 3.1 yards were coming after contact, which shows us a couple of things. One, the young running backs are really making the most out of it. They're getting hit immediately, and they're getting 3 yards. And 2, the offensive line is not successful enough in the run game right now, and that's the problem. It isn't the backs. It's not the young backs. The interesting thing to me was, at Ryan Day's press conference, despite this debacle of a first half against Purdue, from the line, he didn't seem concerned at all. Now, maybe he just doesn't want to show that externally, but he is so maniacal. And at times this year, he's been so critical of things. I found it different that he seemed so chill about the performance, because it was bad, outright bad. And he talked about changing the grading out a champion from 80% to 83% and said that 2 of them graded out a champion. Well, Carson Hinsman gave up 3 pressures. Tegra gave up 2. Van Sickle gave up 1. Luke Montgomery wasn't good. Luke Montgomery gave up 2 pressures. He missed blocks. I believe the champions were Austin Saravel and Ian Moore. I think Ian Moore graded out a champion over 83% in his first ever start. So, some interesting things to talk about as we roll now into game number 10. Game number 10, and an opportunity in game number 10 and number 11 to play with some things. One thing that needs to happen is it's past time that Tegra Shabola is playing 75% of the snaps at right guard. It can't happen anymore, because Tegra is making these errors against a lot of teams that can't really hurt you up front too much. What happens when they're playing against really good teams? And he's doing this. I mean, he bends at his waist straight down. It's just fundamentally horrible, right? They did talk about the fundamentals, how important the fundamentals were, and always comes back to the fundamentals. I don't know how they're running this guy out there still with those fundamentals. And to be honest, this comes back to Bowen at some point. We're too far in the season now to be having these lapses like this. And I mean, if you think I'm making it up, or I'm embellishing the kind of trash we saw the other day from everybody, like a couple of still shots, this is an example of Bo just not even being able to get a yard before Tegra's giving up a tackle. And it's not just him. Kazmarek, same deal. It goes with the tight ends too. Here's Luke Montgomery just totally whiffing and getting a guy straight up into Julian's grill. There's even Austin Sareveld and Luke Montgomery just totally whiffing a double. Guy comes and blows up a play. Here you've got dudes tripping and falling down on each other. Here's a defensive tackle just kind of roaming free. Nobody's going to grab him. I mean, it was an embarrassment. Totally embarrassing. Can't happen. Game 9 of the season. But again, they got it all right in the second half. But you cannot have a first half like that 9 games into the year. So what do we see against UCLA from that offensive line, man? It better be better. That's it. It better be better because you're getting into crunch time now. You're getting into crunch time. And I think it's important to point out, this is not just a Tegra issue. It is a Tegra issue, but it's not just a Tegra issue. So that's where we're at. Now, let's go to you guys in the comments section and see what you have to say. Hey, let's get some likes on the show, guys. Brandingo says, can Phil just go to right guard and take out Tegra? That was my thought, man. That was my thought. Yeah, Ken, they're running into heavy boxes some of the time. I guess my question is, why? Why? What does this accomplish? You're not going to do, like, you practice what you're going to play. Why are you doing this? Why aren't you attaching the RPO and making them come out of that so then you can then practice a run as you'll actually see it? I don't get it. Bugsy's dad says Bo and West have been dynamite. Hope we just use those two in the playoffs. Man, me too. We do have 3 offensive line coaches, Marcus Johnson and Charlie Dickey, and they're all really good coaches. Too many cooks in the kitchen? I don't think so, because they did such a good job of laying out how they're all going to coach the same. And I think the system is laid out perfectly. Like I said, the second half, everything was all cleaned up. The first half was a comedy of errors. It was hilarious. It really was. Oh, Terry, thanks so much for the super chat. My man Terry came through. Terry asked, do you think Drew Aller's career, had it been at Ohio State, do you think Drew Aller's career had been at Ohio State, do you think he regrets picking Penn State over OSU? I think Drew Aller would have been excellent at Ohio State. That's my personal opinion. I think Drew Aller, under Ryan Day's tutelage, would have been a great quarterback with Ohio State wide receivers. He's got an NFL arm. He has an issue. He's really good throwing a lot of routes, comeback routes, crossing routes, things like that. He's not so good throwing go routes, but Ryan Day would have made him better, no doubt. The wide receivers would have made him better, no doubt. But Ohio State didn't get in on him till very late in the cycle. And he was locked in on Penn State. But I appreciate you, brother. So Antonius says, could it be a result of running more zone as opposed to power and counter schemes? It feels like they're better at the latter two. It's actually the opposite this year. So at the end of last year, towards the playoffs and in the playoffs, they started running a lot more counter, a lot more gap, and recognized that the offensive line was way better. And this offensive line is actually much better at zone. They're much better at stretch. They've not been very successful with counter and gap schemes. And a lot of the reason of that is they've been a pretty lousy polling unit. So power, counter, not been great at it. They've been better at zone, and they probably need to focus even more on zone. Like I said, with that diamond formation, that's a result of them being, lousy polling. And a lot of that had to do with when they were playing a lot of the tight ends. They were very bad at identifying where they were going. And defenses are catching on, man. They're catching on. They're playing a lot of different stunts and twists against them, and they're just poor identifying things. They need to, like, when we see teams that really know what they're doing, they're going to be throwing the kitchen sink at this offensive line. They're going to be all over the place because they have a difficult time identifying. So it's got to get better. And this could be true too, Jason. I think the offensive line came out in that game thinking all they had to do was show up. That comes back on the coaches. Absolutely. Gosh, Brandingo. I hate to say it, but I'm kind of missing Fry's line development. Yes, Bones, recruiting is awesome, but I'm not sure. Maybe we just have too many cooks in the kitchen. It's a fair question. I mean, it's fair to bring up at this point. Like, if we were 6 games into the season, it would be like shrug of the shoulders, but we've got 2 games before the game. You know what I mean? And that's why I'm like, dude, this is ridiculous, man. You got guys falling over each other. Like, come on, man. You could have played yakety sacks to the first half. But obviously Tegra, a big problem. What's up, Sue? How you doing? So anyway, friends, we're at 55:47. I do appreciate you joining me. As always, we would ask that you please subscribe to Buckeye Huddle. If you are new to me, I'm Juck. I work for Buckeye Huddle. I also have a channel called Juck on Bucks. And if you like me here, you'll like me there too. It's basically the same show. So you can check me out over there as well. I'm over there about 5 times a week. Over here every Monday and Wednesday at 8 p.m. where we go live. And of course, we interact with the chat here. Have a lot of fun. As always, I appreciate my regulars. You guys are the best. Keep me company on a Monday and Wednesday night. And we've got obviously Saturday, an evening game against UCLA. This game will be on Peacock. Every Ohio State game, I stream live during the game over at Juck on Bucks. If you want some company, if you're by yourself, come over and join us. We talk about the game, the whole game while it's happening live, and laugh at my reactions. So come on, join us over there if you want to. At any rate, please join us again here next Monday at 8 p.m. where we will recap the UCLA game and talk about Rutgers, where we will be less than 2 weeks out from the game. And my guess is it'll be a whole lot of talk about the game, as we will also have a fresh Michigan game to recap as well. And looks like they're going to go into that puppy most likely at 9-2 with an opportunity to beat Ohio State and make it to the playoffs, which absolutely cannot happen and makes the stakes even bigger, which I don't even know how it's possible, but the stakes will be even bigger if they get to that game at 9-2. So at any rate, appreciate you guys so much. Thank you so much for joining me. Appreciate you. I'll talk to you soon.